The storm came in on the wrong side of the moon, and that should have been my first warning. I was alone on Tethys 9 the night she found me. 3,000 clicks of nothing in every direction, a listening post welded to the back of a dead comet, and one human janitor with a bad leg and a worse attitude. That was me, Ezra Vance. Specialist 3rd class, demoted twice, scrubbed off 2 carrier rosters, parked here because nobody could agree on what to do with a man who'd survived a thing he wasn't supposed to survive. The brass had a word for me. The word was unfit. They said it the way you say a stain. I didn't argue. I had the scars to win the argument for me, the left side of my face down to the collarbone, melted and regrown into a pink topography that didn't take to shaving. The leg was worse. The leg woke me up at 300 most nights, and on the bad nights I'd sit at the galley table with a cup of coffee gone cold and listen to the station breathe. Tethys 9 breathed in a deep iron rhythm, a hum you stopped hearing after the first month, the way you stop hearing your own pulse. I missed my mother. I missed her in the simple, stupid way grown men miss their mothers when there's nobody else to miss. She'd been a baker in a town that didn't exist anymore. She used to hum while she worked, a tune older than her grandmother, and I'd learned it without meaning to, the way you learn the shape of a doorway you walk through every day. The town went in the second offensive year. Not from any alien. We hadn't met the aliens yet then, not really. The town went the way a lot of towns went in those years, which was quietly from the inside, the way an apple goes when the rot starts at the core. The bakery closed because there was no flour. Then it closed because there was no power. Then it closed because there were no people. My mother stayed past sense. She kept the starter culture alive in a jar in the cellar until the day the ceiling came down, and when they pulled her out she was still holding the jar, and the starter was still alive, and the medic who found her said he had never seen a thing so stubborn in his life. He said it like a compliment. I have thought about it a lot since. He was right. I keep the recipe she wrote on the back of a feed bill. I keep the pebble I found in the river behind the bakery the summer I turned 9. I keep an enameled pin in the shape of a bee that I bought her for Mother's Day when I was 12, that she wore on the inside of her apron because, she said, the bee was a private thing, and you did not wear private things where strangers could see them. After the funeral, the pin was the only thing of hers small enough to carry on a transport. I put it in a tin with the pebble and the recipe, and I have not been more than 10 meters from that tin in 22 years. The station was quiet around me. That was the worst part of Tethys 9. Not the cold, not the distance, not the food, which was the food that gets sent to the last place on a supply chain, which is to say the food nobody else wanted. The worst part was the quiet, the long iron breath quiet, the quiet that had been a person's whole job to make when this place was built, because a listening post listens, and a thing that listens cannot also be a thing that talks. So Tethys 9 had been built to talk as little as possible. Soft hatches, felted decking in the corridors, sound dampers in the galley so that even the kettle did not whistle. A man alone in a quiet place is a man who learns the sound of his own thoughts. I had learned mine. I did not like them. I had learned them well enough to know, by the 3rd month, which thoughts to follow and which to set down on the deck and walk past, the way you walk past a stray dog whose owner has just come around the corner. The artifact sat in the next room, behind a hand-stamped seal that said classified relic class, Ismara, do not interface. 12 men had died putting it there. The brass didn't tell me that. I'd read it in a logbook somebody forgot to wipe. My job was to keep the lights on and make sure the artifact didn't melt the floor. That was it. That was the whole assignment. 12 men dead and a janitor with a limp to make sure the corpse stayed quiet. Then the flare came. The proximity alarm chirped 3 soft notes, the way a smoke detector chirps when its battery's about to die. I almost ignored it. The big one had hit a week earlier, and I figured this was the aftershock, the bow wave of a CME from the local star, nothing the shielding couldn't drink. I poured a second coffee. I sat with my bad leg up on the console. I watched the readings climb. They didn't stop climbing. They climbed until the lights in the corridor flickered and the deck plates under my boots started to sing, a thin, glassy hum the way wet fingers sing the rim of a wineglass. I sat up. I set the coffee down. I pulled up the artifact feed. The Asmara relic was glowing. It hadn't glowed in 14 years. Not for the analysts. Not for the priests they'd sent. Not for the woman in the photo on the dead man's logbook, the one who touched it with a gloved hand and burned to dust from the inside out. It had sat in that room like a stone in a creek. Now it was glowing the color of the inside of a mouth, and somewhere under my breastbone something old and animal said, "Get up, Ezra. Get up and run." I limped to the hatch instead. I don't know why. I've thought about it since, and the only honest answer is that I was lonely. I was lonely the way you only get lonely when you've been lonely a long time, the loneliness that stops being a feeling and becomes a temperature. I limped to the hatch and I put my hand on the seal and I broke regulation in a way that should have ended my career and probably my life, and I went inside. The relic was the size of a man's torso, and it was breathing. Not metaphorically. The thing had a rhythm, slow expansion, slow contraction, the iridescent skin of it rising and falling. The interface cradle around it had unspooled 3 filaments toward the air, each one fine as spider silk, each one waiting. Waiting like a hand laid flat on a table waits. I should have backed out. I should have keyed the comms and screamed for a relay. I should have done 1,000 things. I sat down in the chair. The filaments found me, not painful. Cold first, 3 pinpricks of cold along my temple behind my ear at the soft hinge of my jaw. Then warm. Then nothing and then she was in the room. She wasn't there. Let me be honest. There was no body, no light, no figure. But the room had a presence in it that hadn't been there a moment before, and the presence was looking at me. The way a cat looks at a window with a bird behind it. The way a queen looks at a courtier she has not yet decided to keep alive. A voice unfolded inside my skull. It was not a sound. It was the memory of a sound, placed there fully formed, with a texture like silk dragged backwards over teeth. "What," said the voice, "are you?" "I'd like to tell you I said something brave. I said, Ezra." A pause. The presence in the room tilted, the way a head tilts. "That is a small noise," she said, "for a small creature." "Yeah, well," I licked my lips. My mouth had gone to chalk. "I'm having a small day." The presence did something I can only describe as a laugh, except it wasn't a laugh. It was the cognitive shape a laugh leaves behind when the laugh itself has been removed. Like a footprint in snow with nothing standing in it. "You are inside a sovereign relay," she said. "You are inside the throat of an Asmara crown. Do you know what this means, small noise?" "No, ma'am." Another pause, longer. "You do not lie," she said, and there was a thread of surprise in it. "You are not lying. You truly do not know." "Lady," I said, "I'm a janitor." She went away. She didn't go away the way a voice goes away when the speaker leaves. She went away the way a tide goes away, drawing back, gathering itself somewhere out past the shore, leaving the bottom of the world wet and strange and quiet. The filaments stayed. The relic kept breathing. I sat in the chair with my hands on my knees and waited for her to come back, because I knew, the way you know weather, that she would. She came back 12 minutes later. "Ezra," she said, and the way she said it was different tasting. "Ezra Vance, specialist, demoted. Unfit. There is a great deal of writing about you, Ezra Vance. None of it is kind." "Where are you reading that?" "Your archive opened to me when you opened to it. Your kind builds locks the way children build sandcastles. You should be ashamed." "Probably," I said. "You are wounded," she said, and the room got cold again, the small cold of the filaments. "Your face, your legs show me." I almost said no. I'm not sure why I didn't. I think it was the way she asked, not as a command, though everything she said was a command. as though showing her was the thing I was for, as though I was an interesting noise she wanted to hear closer. I turned my head, I let her look. A long silence. Then, soft as a hand on the back of a child's neck, soft as my mother humming over rising dough, soft as a thing that knows exactly what it is doing. "You belong to me now, human." I laughed. It came out of me before I could stop it, a small dry laugh, and the room flinched. The relic stuttered in its breathing. The presence rippled in a way that I would learn later meant offense, and then deeper offense, and then, surprisingly, interest. "You laugh," she said. "Lady," I said, "I don't even belong to myself. The line of people who own a piece of me starts at the recruiter and goes around the block. You'll have to take a number." "You laugh at a crown." "I'm laughing at the math." The presence went very still. I'd felt that stillness before. I'd felt it in interrogation rooms and in front of officers, and once, when I was 12, in front of a wolf that wandered down from the hills behind my mother's bakery. It was the stillness of a thing deciding. She decided. "I will return," she said. "Do not die before I do." The filament slid out of my skin like rain pulling back into a cloud. The relic dimmed. I sat in the chair with my bad leg shaking and my coffee cold in the next room and the long iron breath of Tethys 9 in my ears. And I started to laugh again, properly this time. The kind of laugh that's half a sob. The kind a man makes when he realizes the wolf has chosen, for reasons of its own, not to eat him today. She came back the next night, and the night after that, and the night after that. On the fourth night she asked about the fire. I had not talked about the fire. Not to the chaplain on the carrier, not to the woman with the soft voice and the clipboard, not to the medic who changed my dressings for 9 weeks in a row, not to the friend who had not died with the others, who had written me 3 letters from his new posting, and stopped when I did not write back. I had not talked about the fire because the fire was the central fact of my life, and you do not talk about the central fact of your life. You sit next to it. You feed it bread and water. You keep it from getting out. But she asked, and she asked the way she asked everything, not as a question exactly, but as a hand laid flat on the table, palm up, waiting. I told her. I told her about the dropship and the bad seal, and the way the cabin filled with white before any of us could understand what white meant in that context. I told her about Ray's, who I had been laughing with 2 seconds earlier, who was suddenly not laughing and not Ray's. I told her about the way you can lift a man twice your weight when the room is on fire, because the math of weight goes away when the math of fire arrives. I told her about the hatch that would not open, and the hatch that did, and the order I came out in, and the order I should have come out in, which were not the same order, and that not being the same order was a thing I would carry the rest of my life. I told her about the woman in the medbay who said it's not your fault, son, and how I had wanted to put my hand over her mouth, gently, because it was not a sentence she had any right to say to me, because she had not been there, and the only people who could have said that sentence to me were not in the room anymore, and would not be in any room anymore, and that was the whole of the situation. I told her about the leg. I told her about the face. I told her about my mother, finally, because the fire and the bakery had become, in my head, the same fire, and I could not tell them apart anymore. And Velhasser sat in the room with me, that's the only word, and she listened with the patience of a thing that is older than my whole species. And she did not say it's not your fault, son, because she had learned, somewhere in the 4 days she had been knowing me, that this was a sentence a person did not need to hear. When I was done, she said, "Ezra Vance." "Yes, ma'am." "I am going to tell you a thing now. I will tell you at once because I am only able to say it once, the way your bee stings once. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." "You were not the wrong one to come out of that hatch." I started to cry. I had not cried in 11 years. I cried sitting in the interface chair with the filaments at my temple and the relic breathing in front of me and the long iron breath of Tethys 9 around me, and Velhasser stayed. She did not flinch. She did not look away. She did the only thing a queen of the Asmara crown could do, which was to be present, which is the only thing any of us can ever do for each other, finally, and which is the thing my whole species had spent 10,000 years learning to do imperfectly, which is the thing she had just learned to do for the first time, by watching me. When I stopped, she said, "I am tired now, Ezra." "I know, ma'am. This work being a person, it is harder than being a crown." "Yes, ma'am." "How do you bear it?" "You don't bear it alone, mostly. That's the trick of it." She was quiet. "I see," she said. She went away then, and she did not come back for a day, and when she came back her voice was different. It was not the silk-on-teeth voice anymore. It was the voice of a person who had spent a day sitting alone in a very large room thinking about a small thing, and had decided about the small thing. "Ezra," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "Show me your mother's tin again." I showed her. I should explain about the Asmara, because by the time she came back the third night I'd done my homework, and what I'd learned changed the shape of the room I was sitting in. The Asmara were a crowned civilization. That word didn't mean what it sounded like. A crown was a kind of hive, not insects, nothing so simple but a braided thing, a sovereignty woven out of thousands of subordinate minds with one queen at the apex doing the thinking the rest couldn't. There were 9 crowns in the local arm of the galaxy. Together, they had ground 43 species to powder in the last 600 years. Humanity wasn't on the menu yet because humanity wasn't worth eating. The crowns considered us presentient, a noise the universe was making on a wet rock, a small noise. Velhasser was the queen of the Asmara crown. The relic I was babysitting was her relic, a piece of her, in the way a fingernail is a piece of a person. The analysts had been wrong about what it was for. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a beacon. It was a window, and the woman on the other side of the window had just noticed there was a face on this side. "You are reading about me," she said the third night. "Yes, ma'am." "You are afraid." "Yes, ma'am." "Good," she said, and I could hear the smile in it. "You should be." But she came back, and she kept coming back, and after a while I noticed something I am not sure she meant to let me notice. She was lonely too. Not the way I was lonely. She had a court of 10,000. She had a crown of bonded minds that sang to her every waking hour. She had captains and consorts and a navy that could glass a continent before lunch. But there was a place in her she wasn't allowed to show those 10,000, and the place had a shape I recognized. And the shape was the shape of a person sitting alone in a room with a cold coffee at 300, listening to the building breathe. She came back because I was the only thing in the universe she could talk to without being a queen. I learned this the way you learn most true things, by accident. She had been ordering me to describe my species, a kind of survey, the way a butcher surveys a hog, and I'd run dry of useful things to say, and so I'd said instead, "Let me show you something." I went to my bunk. I came back with a flat tin the size of my palm. Inside the tin, a pebble from the riverbed behind my mother's bakery. A folded paper recipe card with my mother's handwriting, ingredients for honey bread, the corner stained with what was probably honey. A photograph of my unit before the fire, 6 men and 1 woman in dress grays, and me at the end with my face still my face. A small enameled pin in the shape of a bee. I laid them out one by one on the deck plate in front of the relic. "This is a stone," I said, "from a river on a planet you've never seen. I picked it up when I was 9 because I liked the way the sun went through it. This is my mother's handwriting. She's dead now. The bread she made on Sundays, this is how she made it, and if I make it her way, I can almost smell her kitchen. This is the people I worked with before I got these scars. 5 of them died with me. 1 of them didn't. This is a bee. Bees are an insect on Earth. They sting you and then they die because they only get to do it once, and I keep this pin because Because I think that's brave, ma'am. I think doing the thing you can only do once and dying of it is the bravest thing in the universe. The room was very quiet. I thought I'd lost her. I thought I'd bored a queen of the Ismara crown with a tin of garbage from a dead woman's house, and I waited to hear her dismiss me the way she dismissed her captains, with that little title pull back. Instead she said, in a voice I had not heard from her before, small, almost a child's voice, "Why did you show me these?" "Because you asked who we were." "I asked who your species was." "Same answer, ma'am." A long silence. "Show me the stone again," she said. I showed her the stone. I held it up in my palm. The filaments touched my wrist, gently, the way you touch a horse to let it know you're behind it. "The sun goes through it," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "You picked it up when you were 9. "Yes." She stopped. She'd never stopped before. Queens don't stop. My larval mothers had a stone like this, in the deep nursery. When the worker tier brought us up to be ranked, I was the only one of my brood who reached for it instead of the throne fruit. They struck me for it. They said a crown does not reach for stones. They were wrong, ma'am. They were correct. A crown does not reach for stones. They were wrong, I said again, gentler. You reached for it. That means a crown reaches for stones. They were describing themselves, ma'am, not you. I felt her go still in a new way, not the stillness of a thing deciding to kill. The stillness of a thing that has been told, after a very long time, that the wound it's been carrying is a real wound. She did not come back for 6 days. When she came back, she was angry. "You did something to me," she said. "I didn't, ma'am." "You did. She made a sound I had never heard her make, a sound like a bell with a crack in it. There is a thinking in me that wasn't there. It says your words. It says them in your voice. I cannot silence it." "I'm sorry, ma'am." "You are not sorry, you are pleased." "A little bit, ma'am, yes." "I should burn your station to slag," she said. "I should call my 3rd fleet and turn this comet into a memory." "You could," I said. "I will." "Okay." She didn't. She sat in the room with me. That's the only word for it, sat, though she had no body to sit with. And she did not speak for nearly an hour, and I did not speak either, and we sat together in the long iron breath of Tethys 9 like two people who have just realized they have done something neither of them can undo. "Ezra," she said finally. "Yes, ma'am." "I have made a mistake." "Tell me." "I have shown you the door I came through. The relic, when it opens both ways, it shows. My captains will see. They will see that a crown has spoken to a small noise on a wet rock, and they will see what I have said, and they will see what I have not killed, and they will, Ezra, do you understand? They will not kill me. A crown cannot be killed by her court, but they will take the crown from me. They will pull the braid apart and weave another at the apex, and the new one will not. She will not have reached for the stone. I was quiet a long time. "How long do we have?" I said. 12 of your days, perhaps fewer. There is a fleet inbound to verify the relic's status. They will arrive and find me here in conversation, and they will understand. Then we have 12 days. To do what, Ezra Vance? I looked at the small tin on the deck plate, the pebble, the recipe, the bee. To make you too expensive to replace, I said. She laughed. The first real laugh I'd heard from her, startled out of her, the way a real laugh always is. It was a beautiful sound. It made the relic's skin ripple, made the filaments shiver. "You are mad," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "What is your plan, small noise?" "I don't have one yet. I have a feeling." "A feeling?" "Yes, ma'am." "Tell me your feeling, then." I thought about it. I thought about it the way my mother used to think about a dough that wasn't rising, patient, listening, hands on the bowl. "Your captains," I said, "they think you're a kind of machine. A very fine machine, but a machine. A crown at the apex of a braid. If you stop being a machine, if you start being a person, they don't know how to throw you away. They built a chair that only fits a crown. If you sit in it as a person, they have to either let you stay or admit they built the wrong chair. And how does a crown become a person? Ezra Vance. I think she already did, ma'am. Quiet. What do you need from me? She said. Time on the relay, and don't laugh, I want to send you something. Send me what? All of it. All of what? Us, I said. Humanity, every song, every recipe card, every stupid argument, every funeral, every wedding, every poem that didn't rhyme, every bee. I want to pour it through this thing and into your braid, and I want your 10,000 to hear it, not as an attack, as a gift, as a wound. I want them to feel what you felt the night I showed you the stone. They will resist. Some of them, sure. Many of them. Sure. And some of them, she said slowly, will reach for the stone. Yes, ma'am. A long pause. This is a terrible plan, Ezra Vance. Yes, ma'am. It will probably fail. Yes, ma'am. My captains will arrive before you finish. Maybe. They will kill you. They might. Why? She said, and her voice was small again, smaller than I'd ever heard it, smaller than a queen's voice has any business being. Why are you doing this? I thought about lying. I'm a bad liar. I told her the truth. Because you touched my face, I said, and you didn't flinch. The room was quiet for a long time. Begin, she said. We had 11 days. We worked. I'd never worked like that in my life. I haven't worked like that since. I pulled down the entire civilian archive of Tethys 9, every cultural artifact, every museum scan, every folk recording the surveyors had bothered to upload. I pulled down the military archive too because she asked for it, and I trusted her, which is a thing I'd never said about anyone above me in my own chain of command. I pulled down my own files, the pictures from before. The letters my mother had sent in the year before she died, the ones I had not been able to open. I sent her those too. She read them. She read them while I slept, and when I woke she told me in her silk-on-teeth voice that my mother had been a good baker and a better mother, and that the recipe for honey bread was wrong on the card, that the measurement for the honey was wrong, that my mother had been adjusting it from memory because my mother had known the dough better than the paper did. I cried for half an hour. Velhasser did not speak. She sat with me. She had learned to do that. On the second day, she asked me to explain weddings. I tried. I tried for an hour. I told her about my cousin's wedding in the rain, the canopy that gave up at the third toast, the bride laughing with her hair plastered to her face. I told her about the kind of weddings that happen in courthouses with 2 witnesses pulled from the corridor. I told her about the kind that don't get called weddings, that happen in field hospitals or on rooftops or in the back of trucks when 2 people decide against a deadline to be each other's people from now until then. She asked me what the words were. I said the words varied. She asked which words were not allowed to vary. I thought about it. I said, I choose you. Those are the words, ma'am. The rest is decoration. The Asmara, she said, did not have a word for this. They had words for braiding and for bonding and for being assigned to, and they had a word for the act by which a crown received her court, but they did not have a word for 2 adults of free intention agreeing to be each other's people, because in the Asmara crown there were no adults of free intention, only crowns and their braids. She was quiet a long time after I told her that. Then she said, very softly, then I will learn the word. On the 3rd day, I taught her to hum. It was the tune, my mother's tune, the one older than my grandmother. I hummed it for her over and over because she said she wanted to learn a thing that had no purpose, a thing that was only itself, and humming a tune to no one is the most useless thing I know. She listened. On the 5th pass she hummed it back to me, through the relic, in a voice that was not silk and not teeth and not a queen, and I sat in the chair and put my hands over my face and did not move for a long time. On the fourth day, she asked me about funerals. I told her. I told her about the way my unit had been buried 5 small markers in a row, the 6th one for the one who survived left blank, because the regulation said you did not bury a man you had not killed. I told her about my mother, buried under the bakery before there was a body to bury, the rubble itself the only marker. I told her about civilian funerals, the kind where strangers stand in a room and say small, careful things about a person they did not know well enough to know the careful things were wrong. I told her about Irish wakes, what little I knew of them, and about the open coffin and about the closed coffin, and about the kind of funeral where there is no coffin because there is no body and the family sits in a circle with a photograph in the middle and tells stories until the stories run out, which they do not ever fully. She asked me what the funeral was for. I said, it's for the living, ma'am. The dead don't need it, the living do. She said, why? I said, because we need to put the person down. We need to set them on a shelf, not throw them away, set them, so we can come back and visit. The funeral is the act of building the shelf. She was quiet a long time. My crown, she said, does not build shelves. When a queen is taken from the apex, her braid is unwoven. The minds that knew her are not asked to remember her. They are asked to forget her in the same gesture by which they receive the new queen. There is no shelf, Ezra Vance. That sounds lonely, ma'am. It is not lonely, it is efficient. Those aren't different things in the way you think they are, ma'am. She thought about that for a long time. On the 5th day, she told me how to wire the relay. The plan was simple in the way bad plans are simple. The relic could push outbound through her braid. I could push inbound through the relic. If we matched our pushes, if we sang into it together, her down her line and me up mine, we would saturate the Asmara hivenet for approximately 11 minutes before the firewalls reasserted. 11 minutes of unfiltered humanity poured into 10,000 minds that had never tasted anything but the crown's own broth. It would not work the way I wanted, she said. Many of her 10,000 would resist. Some would feel nothing. Some would feel something and dismiss it. Some would go mad. But some, she could not say how many, but some would reach for the stone. And those, she said, those would be the ones who could not be unmade by her captain's replacement crown, because they would remember. They would remember the night they heard a human mother humming over rising dough, and they would never quite be Asmara again. They would be something new, a small thing, a noise. A bee, I said. Yes, she said, a bee. On the 6th day, she touched my wound again. I was lying on the deck plate. The leg had gone out from under me mid-step, the way it sometimes did when I'd been on it too long. I'd hit the floor harder than I should have. I was lying there laughing because the alternative was screaming, and she came through the filaments and laid a presence over the side of my face, the burned side, the side that didn't take to shaving, and she said, soft, "Does this hurt?" "No, ma'am." "Does this?" "No." "You are lying." "A little, ma'am." "I am sorry, Ezra Vance." "For what?" "For," she stopped. "I do not know the word. Your archive has not given me the word." "Try." She tried. The shape of what she sent was a word my language did not have. It was the word for being a queen and finding, on a wet rock at the back of a dead comet, the one thing in the universe she had not been allowed to want, and being too late to want it without ruining both of them. It was a long word. She held it inside the side of my face for a long time. "Velha," I said finally. "Yes." That's a feeling, Velha." "I know. That's just a feeling. People have those. Crowns do not." "You do." She was quiet. "Then I am not a crown," she said. "I know, ma'am." On the 8th day, her captains broke high orbit. I felt her feel it. The relic shuddered, the way a person shudders when a door opens behind them in a house they thought was empty. She came through the filaments, and her voice was clipped, fast, professional, the voice she had not used with me in weeks. 2 days, she said, maybe less. They will have run a long-range sweep of the relic and seen the conversation log. The lead captain is named Teskoru. She was my favorite. She is the one who will pull the braid apart. She loves me, Ezra. That is why she will do it cleanly. Then we go tonight. We are not ready. We are never going to be ready, ma'am. We go tonight. She did not argue. I rigged the relay. I did it with hands that were not steady. I did it with a soldering iron that had been issued to me in 2179 and had been my company for longer than most of my company. I did it with the small tin open on the deck plate beside me, the pebble and the bee watching, and I hummed my mother's tune the whole time, and Velhasser hummed it back to me through the relic, both of us humming and working and not speaking because there was nothing left to say that we had not already said. At 23:47 station time, I keyed the broadcast. I won't tell you what we sent. I couldn't if I wanted to. 11 minutes is a long time to sing, and we sang everything, every recipe card, every funeral, every wedding, every poem that didn't rhyme, every bee, every stone, every river the sun went through. We sang my mother and her mother and the bakery and the boys in the photograph and the woman who had touched the relic and burned to dust. We sang the things I had not said to my unit before the fire and the things she had not said to her brood sisters before the throne fruit. We sang the small noises. We sang them very loud. 11 minutes. At minute 9, the firewall began to reassert. I felt it as a pressure behind my eyes, the Ismara hivenet pushing back, trying to scrub the song out of itself. Velhasser screamed. It was the first time I'd heard her scream, and it was a sound I will hear until I die. It was the sound of a queen being torn out of her own people. At minute 10, her captains hit the station. The lights went red. The proximity alarm went past chirp into wail. Somewhere far down the corridor, a hatch blew and Tethys 9 began the slow iron groan of a thing that knew it was about to die. At minute 11, I cut the broadcast. The relic went dark. Velhasser was still in the room. They are here, she said. I know. They will board in moments. I know. Ezra. Yes, ma'am. You belong to me now. I laughed, soft, tired, the good kind of laughter, the kind you laugh when the work is done and the bread is rising and you don't yet know if the oven will hold its heat. No, Your Highness, I said. You belong to yourself now. So do I. That's the whole thing, ma'am. That's the only thing I wanted to teach you. We don't belong to each other. We choose each other. Every day on purpose like a bee. That's the human part. The room was very still. She touched my face one more time, the burned side, the side that didn't take to shaving. She touched it and she did not flinch, and I did not flinch, and somewhere on the far side of the relic, in a braid I would never see, 10,000 Ismara were sitting very quietly with my mother's tune in their heads, and some small number of them. She had said it would be small. She had said some were reaching, in a place their captains could not see for a stone. Ezra Vance, she said. Yes, ma'am. I choose you. I choose you too, Velha. On purpose. On purpose every day. Like a bee. Like a bee. The hatch behind me blew. I'd like to say I turned and faced them with a weapon in my hand. I didn't have a weapon. I had a soldering iron and a small tin with a pebble in it and a bad leg that was already shaking. I stood up anyway. I stood up the way my mother stood up when the bakery's roof started to go and she went back inside for the starter culture because some things, she said, you do not leave behind to burn. I stood up and I turned around and I faced them. The Ismara boarding party came through the hatch in a single braided motion, 6 of them, tall as doorways, their carapaces the color of wet slate. They moved the way water moves when it is one body, every limb of every one of them committed to a single intention, no wasted motion, no individual voice. I had read about it. Reading about it and standing in front of it were not the same thing. Standing in front of it was the closest I have ever come to understanding what it would feel like to be a deer when the hunters arrive. Except the deer never has time to think the word hunters, and I had time to think a great many words, and most of the words were the names of people I had loved. The lead one was a head taller than the rest. Teskoru. She had 8 eyes and they were all looking at me, and none of them were kind. She spoke. Velhasser translated into my skull, instant, almost gentle. You are the human. Yes, ma'am. You have done a great violence to my crown. Yes, ma'am. My queen is compromised. No, ma'am. Your queen is a person. The 8 eyes did something, a small ripple, a flutter, that I would not understand for years, and would only understand when I learned it was the Asmara expression for a thing being said that was not in the vocabulary you were prepared for. Teskoru stepped forward. She raised a forelimb. The edge of it was a blade longer than my arm. I did not step back. I could not have stepped back if I'd wanted to. My leg had stopped negotiating with me an hour ago. I stood there with the soldering iron in my hand the way a man holds a candle in a room full of moths, which is to say uselessly, and I waited for Teskoru to do the thing she had come here to do. I thought about my mother. I thought about the jar in the cellar. I thought about her stepping back through the doorway with the starter alive in her arms, the ceiling already singing the long high song it would sing for the next 2 seconds before it came down. I thought, she did not leave it behind to burn. I thought, I will not leave Velhasser behind to burn. I thought, this is what the bee meant. This is what I was carrying the pin for. I closed my eyes. Velhasser did not speak in my head. She spoke out loud. She spoke through the relic, through the station speakers, through every comm channel on Tethys 9 and through every Asmara channel in the boarding ship outside. And she spoke in 2 languages at once, hers and mine, braided, and what she said was not long, but it changed the room. Teskoru, she said, sister. I reached for the stone. The boarding party stopped. I watched them stop. I watched 8 eyes per face go through something I had only ever seen in a human face once, in my mother, the day she got the letter that said my father was not coming back from the war. I watched a hive made of slate carapaces and forelimb blades become, for one beat, 10,000 kilometers wide and 1 heart deep, a thing that had just been told the wound it had been carrying was a real wound. Teskoru's forelimb came down, slowly, not on me. She looked at the relic. Her 8 eyes were very wet, in a way I will not pretend I understood. My queen, she said. Yes, Tess. Teskoru's voice broke. I had not known the Asmara could break their voices. I heard the tune, in the night. I thought I dreamed it. My brood mother used to make a sound, before the worker tier took us up. I had forgotten the sound. The human gave it back to me. The human's mother made it first, Velha said gently. He only carried it. My queen. Yes, sister. What do we do? I sat down. My leg gave out. I sat down on the deck plate with the small tin beside me, the pebble and the bee watching, and I started to laugh again, that half-sob laugh, the one I'd laughed the first night, the one a man laughs when the wolf decides, for reasons of its own, not to eat him today. Velhasser was quiet a long moment. Then, softly, in both languages at once, she said, We choose, sister, we choose each other on purpose, every day like a bee. A bee, my queen. It is a small insect. From a wet rock, it stings once and dies of it. Ezra Vance says this is the bravest thing in the universe. Ezra Vance is a small noise. Yes, Tess, he is, and we are going to keep him. I have been on Tethys 9 a long time since that night. The station did not die. The boarding party did not kill me. They sat with me in the end, the 6 of them and me and the relic and Velhasser, and we drank coffee. I drank coffee, they did not, but they watched me drink coffee with a kind of grave attention, the way you watch a foreign write, and we talked in two languages braided about what came next. What came next was not peace. I want to be honest. The Asmara crown did not become friends with humanity overnight. The other 8 crowns did not become friends with anyone. The fleets did not stand down. The war that wasn't yet a war did not become unwar. But something cracked. That's all I'll claim. Something cracked. Some small number of the 10,000 and then some larger number and then some not small anymore number began to reach for stones. They reached for them in their nurseries. They reached for them at their thrones. They reached for them in their parliaments and their war rooms and their long iron-breathed listening posts. And the crowns above them, the 8 other crowns, began to feel a small noise rising in their braids that they had not been able to silence. And the small noise was a tune older than my grandmother. And the small noise carried, in its undervoice, a single human word that did not translate cleanly. The word was B. I want to tell you the rest, because the rest is the part you don't read about in the official histories. The official histories will tell you about the Asmara Concordance 2 years later, the strange unilateral cessation of hostilities, the long, careful negotiations conducted by a queen who, by all reports, was not behaving like a queen. The official histories will tell you about the sister crown, the one Teskuru built, after her own apex was vacated by a thing she could not quite explain to the next in line, and the way the sister crown began slowly to send envoys to human worlds, envoys who did not arrive in warships, but in slow, patient vessels with small tins on board, full of stones their broodmothers had given them in the deep nursery. The histories will tell you the crowns that did not crack, the ones that hardened, Yevthal, Kor Amara, the black crown of the outer ring, and what they did in the long years after, when they understood that one of their sisters had been broken open by a song. They will tell you all that. The histories are good now. We have good historians. A lot of them are Asmara. They started being historians in the years after the concordance, because the sister crown decided that a people who do not build shelves are a people who will keep losing themselves to the same fires, and a shelf, she said, quoting a janitor from a wet rock, is what the funeral is for. They built shelves. They built whole libraries of shelves. They built a hall in the central nursery of the Asmara homeworld that holds, in a glass case at its center, 3 objects: a pebble from a river behind a bakery that does not exist anymore, a folded paper recipe for honey bread, and a small enameled pin in the shape of a bee. I have visited the hall. The Asmara children file past the case in slow, respectful groups, and the docent, an older Asmara who has 8 eyes and a voice like a soft bell, tells them, every time, the same story. She tells them about the storm that came in on the wrong side of the moon. She tells them about the janitor with the burned face. She tells them about the queen who reached for the stone. She does not tell them my name when she tells the story. I asked her not to. I told her the story was not about me. She did not argue. She told me the first time we met that the docents had a saying about the case in the central hall, and the saying was, "The bee does not name itself." I asked her where she had heard the saying. She said the sister crown had given it to her. I said, "That sounds like something Velha would say." She said, "Yes, she is the one who said it." I am an old man now. I'm older than I had any business getting. The leg is worse. The face is the same pink topography that still doesn't take to shaving. The brass eventually figured out what to do with me, which was to leave me on Tethys 9 and pretend I had never been there. And I was content with that, because Tethys 9 had become a kind of home in a way I had not expected, and I did not want to leave the room where the relic had glowed for the first time. They kept me supplied. They sent me, once a year, a junior officer to write up a report I knew they would never read, and I told the junior officer the same lies every year, and the junior officer wrote them down the same way every year, and we both pretended the system was working. It was working in its way. The system did not need to know what had happened in that room. The system had 8 other crowns to worry about. The sister crown was not its problem anymore. Velhasser visits me when she can, which is often. She has a body now, or a shape that approximates one, woven out of light and the patient work of 1,000 consenting minds. She sits with me at the galley table at 300 when my leg is bad, and we drink coffee. I drink coffee, she watches. And sometimes she touches the side of my face, the burned side, and I do not flinch, and she does not flinch, and we do not speak because we have already said the things we needed to say. Sometimes she hums. It is my mother's tune. She has learned it perfectly. She hums it the way my mother hummed it, with the small catch in the third bar where my mother used to breathe, and I sit there at the galley table with the long iron breath of Tethys 9 around us, and the small tin open in front of me, the pebble, the recipe card, the bee. And I think about what she said to me, that first night, in the silicon teeth voice she does not use anymore. You belong to me now, human. I think about how wrong she was, and how she knew even then that she was wrong, and how she said it anyway because it was the only language her mouth had been given. I think about the thing I taught her, the small thing, the only thing that you do not belong to anyone, that you choose on purpose every day like a bee. That the choosing is the human part, and that the human part is the part that scared her crown down to its roots, because a crown is a thing that is given, and a choice is a thing that is taken, and the universe runs on the difference. There is a question I get asked, sometimes, by the rare visitor who knows. They want to know what the human part really is. They want to know what is the small thing that 10,000 minds could not hold against. They want a sentence they can take home and put on a wall. I do not have a good sentence. I am not a man who has good sentences. I am a janitor with a soldering iron and a tin of garbage from a dead woman's house, and the only thing I ever did with my life was sit in a chair when I should not have, and answer a question I had no right to answer, and tell a queen of the Ismara crown the truth. The truth is this. The thing that scared her crown was not our weapons. We did not have weapons that mattered. The thing that scared her crown was not our numbers. We were small. The thing that scared her crown was not our cleverness. The Ismara were cleverer than us by orders of magnitude. The thing that scared her crown was that we had decided, somewhere in our long dirty history on a wet rock, to choose each other. On purpose. Every day. With nothing forcing us to. With no crown above us telling us how. Two strangers in a courthouse with two witnesses pulled from the corridor saying I choose you, and meaning it, and showing up the next day, and the next day, and the next, until one of them died of it, and the other one carried the choice the rest of the way. That was the thing, that was the small noise, that was the bee. A crown is a thing that is given. A choice is a thing that is taken. The universe runs on the difference. And the difference is where humanity lives, and the difference is the wound the queen of the Ismara crown touched on the side of my face in the first hour she knew me, and did not flinch from, and could not afterwards ever quite close again. I am Ezra Vance, specialist 3rd class, demoted twice, unfit. Janitor of Tethys 9. The man who taught a queen of the Ismara crown to hum a tune older than her grandmother and reach, in the deep nursery of her own self, for a stone. The storm came in on the wrong side of the moon, and I was lonely, and I limped to the hatch, and I went inside. I would do it again. I would do it on purpose. Every day. Like a bee.